Have you tried throwing Wraith Guards at them? That usually works. Does it still work?
Yes! Why are people on about Wraith Guards today?
Fucking elves! Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Warhammer 40k, a universe so dark that your race was responsible for murder-fucking a god into existence! Last time we talked about the Space Marines, the super soldiers of the Imperium of Man. Now, we are talking about an army that I personally struggle to fight anytime I play a game of 40k, the Eldar. An army who is fast, hard-hitting, and arrogant as all hell. But before we get into the lore, let's talk about something quickly. Eldar have recently had two other model groups lumped into them, the Yori and Harley Quinns. Though both factions have their own split-off lore, we will be covering the Eldar in general lore for this video. So if you were hoping for a stand-up show from the Laughing God, sorry, not happening. Let's get into it.
This right here is my favorite thing, ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake, not sleeping, because I'm thinking about this.
The Eldar's history goes back all the way to the War in Heaven, which, if you remember our Necron video, was a war between the ancient Necron tier and the Old Ones. The Eldar, who were either created by the Old Ones or merely chosen by them, helped the Old Ones and the new race, the Krorks, fight the Necrons off. After the Old Ones went extinct and the Necrons entombed themselves inside their tomb complexes, it left a massive power vacuum that the Eldar would happily fill. Making use of the Old Ones' ancient technology, along with not only learning, but mastering a dimension called the Webway, a realm that is basically a white void full of doors, leading to what we call Webway gates, the Eldar swiftly began to conquer the galaxy and expand their empire and control. In a short time, they became the true masters of the galaxy. During this golden age, the Eldar had figured out how to solve most of their empire's problems. Food, military defense, housing, everything was settled, and the Eldar would eventually create what could be described as a genuine utopia. No one had to work, no one starved, and all their needs were met. But when you have nothing to do, you will develop hobbies, interests, and other things to help stave off boredom, leading to a renaissance of art and creation in the Empire, but also would lead to their destruction. You see, my friends, every Eldar, ranging from the newest born baby to the most ancient of Eldar seers, are psychic. As well, an Eldar's emotional state and feelings are much stronger and more passionate than a human's. So you can see where this is going. Slowly, the Empire began to become more reclusive, insular, and more culty. The interests the Eldar populace fell into became more and more extreme. Eventually, some members of the Eldar Empire saw that their people were heading down a path that could not end well. So they either went to self-exile, choosing to live a more simple and primitive life, leading to the Eldar Exodites, or building massive ship cities called Craftworlds. Those that left the Empire made the right decision, as during this time, massive warp storms would cloud the galaxy, as though the galaxy itself was going through a temperamental time. On the Empire's last day, while the pleasure cults reached the apex of their pleasure, the ultimate climax led to the warp finally letting out all the pains it was holding back. Slaanesh, the chaos deity of excess and hedonism. As the god was born, the reaction to the mortal plane was extreme. A tear forming in the galaxy known as the Eye of Terror. Any Eldar that was caught in the tear was devoured by Slaanesh. Those on the Craftworlds and the Exodites were the only survivors. Since then, the Eldar have been fighting off the extinction of their race, while trying to build a new home in a hostile galaxy that they once ruled over. Though, with the rise of the Yori, they might be able to get something back. Let's get into the army.
Oh no, it all went wrong!
The Eldar are the glass cannon army of 40k. fast and hard-hitting, but their infantry is generally very fragile. However, their army ability, Strands of Fate, is extremely frustrating. Do you guys remember the Sisters of Battle's Act of Faith ability? Yeah, Strands of Fate is just that, but way better. Before the game begins, you roll 12d6, or 15d6 if you include a certain character. Whatever you roll on these dice are kept in a pool that you can use to replace other rolls that you make during the game. Of course, if you don't like the rolls that you got, you can choose to re-roll the whole pool at the cost of losing a single fate die, each time you choose to re-roll it. This is just a way better version of the Act of Faith. And yes, Eldar do have a way to get more faith dice. Unlike Sisters, they can replace as many dice in a roll as they please, so long as they have the fate dice to do so, instead of being limited to just one die. So, to my fellow Sisters players, sorry about that. Let's get into their units.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Okay, thanks to Eldar getting the additional units from the Harley Quinn model line and the Yori being brought in, we will talk about those two in their own categories. Here, we are strictly talking about the Craftworld Eldar. Craftworlds are designed to be glass cannons. Your regular infantry are fragile civilians given guns. They shoot and fight like Space Marines while having the stats of a regular guardsman. Your tanks and most of your other vehicles, aside from your walker units, are all gravity-based vehicles, meaning that all terrain on the table that isn't a building can just be ignored, giving you a very mobile and fast-hitting army. Hell, you have jet bikes for crying out loud, one of the fastest units in the game. Craftworlders hit hard, move fast, and though their stuff isn't as tough as other armies, that doesn't mean they can't hit way above their weight class.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
So, you want to know where your elite infantry are? Here you go. Aspect shrines are in-lore places that an individual chooses to go to so they can focus on a single way of conducting war. These units are meant to do very specific jobs, and only those jobs, but also come with their own hero unit to help them complete their tasks way easier. Units like the Dark Reapers are meant to be elite infantry hunters, chewing up your opponent's most elite units from range, while units like the Howling Banshees will absolutely tear up your opponent's chaff units. The downside of these units is, again, just the obvious glaring weaknesses. If it's a ranged aspect shrine, it most likely won't survive close combat, while the close combat shrines will get absolutely mulched from anti-infantry ranged fire. So be smart when deploying and moving these units around.
One debt to society later.
Now, you may be asking, Announcer, I thought this was the fast glass cannon army. Where the hell did these things come from? Well, yeah. But sometimes you need a unit that can take a hit to protect your more fragile infantry. Wraith constructs are beefy, slow, and hard-hitting heavy units. They are the most annoying unit an Eldar army can field. Wraith Guards are the Eldar equivalent to Space Marine Terminators. The Wraith Lords are a Dreadnought equivalent, and the Wraith Knight is comparable to the Imperial Knights. The only real downside of these things is that they are slower than the rest of your army. Unless it's a Knight, which in that case, its only real problem is just being a massive target. Wraith units are your best friend as an Eldar player, so don't be afraid to field them. But expect a lot of groans at the table. Especially from me.
Put your hands up. This is a mockery. Don't you mean a robbery?
Don't you mean a robbery? Don't you mean a robbery?
Harley Quinns sadly got lumped into the Eldar army, and well, they feel like another aspect shrine unit, which just means they are arguing for spots in the army. Sadly, with the loss of their own unique identity, they also lost their ability to ignore moving over enemy models normally. But they do get their own cheaper transports, and their bikers are much better than regular Eldar jet bikes, and can take a bit more damage. What makes Harlequins worth considering, though, is that their infantry gets a 4+ invulnerable save. That helps protect them from some of the nastiest weapons in melee and ranged. But if your opponent catches a Harley Quinn unit in the open, with weapons that hit with a good quantity of shots, you'll find that your clowns are gonna, well, get clowned on. Of course, keeping in mind you can only take a certain amount of points for Harley Quinns depending on the game's size. So, be aware of that.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Okay, let's finally get this out of the way. The Yori are a strange army to take, as they can slot in units from the Dark Eldar army. Taking them comes at the cost of Dark Eldar units being unable to take upgrades, and you are unable to take some units, such as the Aspect Shrine Leaders, the Avatar of Cain, the Harley Quinn Solitaire, and Homunculi Coven units. You can only take Dark Eldar if Yvraine is your warlord. Yvraine fills a good support role for your army though, being a medic for the units that she is a part of, and being a pretty scary anti-infantry character. But Yvraine isn't alone, as she has the Vizark, who is a bodyguard who can join any unit that Yvraine is a part of. The Vizark is just a dueling hero type, who wants to hunt down other characters or elite units and cut them down. There isn't much else to say on these guys, until Eldar get their own book, and their rules are a little bit more fleshed out.
Shadow, it's me, the devil. I'm here to convince you to do sin.
So, Eldar already have their Imperial Knight equivalent with the Wraith Knight. But what the hell is the job of these two weirdos? Well, they are your super units, and they can cause a lot of problems for your opponents on the table. The Avatar of Cain is meant to be the center of your army, leading your army into a melee tornado that can rip out the throat of your opponent's army. The Yakarn is an even stranger super unit. If this unit is set up on the table and a friendly unit is completely wiped out, the Yakarn can teleport to where that unit was killed, so long as it doesn't get into base-to-base contact with enemy units. This allows for a pretty scary unit to get across the board and be a tornado in your opponent's back line. The downside of these two is that they suffer from big model syndrome. They will be targeted, and your opponent dedicates enough of their army to the task, they can be killed rather easily. Of course, that's the problem with most big things in 40k, so don't be discouraged by that. And that's the Eldar. A very strange army when you look at them. On the one hand, this army is incredibly fluid and highly customizable, much like Space Marines are. But there is a big problem with them. I do not recommend them as your first army to play in Warhammer. They require at least some basic knowledge on how the game works and require someone who already has a good understanding of army synergy to make them work. Although, if you want a challenge and are okay with thinking an army through to its base components and fleshing those components out, go ahead and take them. I personally don't like Eldar, as they feel like a mix of Space Marines and another army we will be talking about. And hopefully, going through that army will explain why. The Imperial Guard, or as they're known as now, the Astra Militarum. See you guys next time. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the channel or Patreon to see my videos early. See you next time, everybody.